Hi, I'm Jonathan Fields, and this is Good Life Project. Really excited to be hanging out today with Tommy Bahler. Tommy is a composer, singer, songwriter, and now author. He has worked with everyone from Quincy Jones to Elvis Presley, the Monkees, Cher, Michael Jackson, Billy Joel. He's arranged, and I think actually did a lot more on We Are the World with Everybody Knows. And now he's got a really cool new book that we're going to talk about that's just out, and really track this extraordinary journey. So it's awesome to be hanging out with you today.
I'm so glad to be here.
You had this stunning journey in music, and it's not just music to you, it's just like the muse seems to show up in all sorts of different forms.
Yes.
So I want to explore that journey, but let's go back. I mean, because this has been your whole life. When did you know that this was a path, like this was going to be it for you?
When I was 6, I asked my dad, how do you be creative? And he said, I'll tell you how I do it. And I love that about Dad because he never said, this is the way. In fact, he would say, if somebody says this is the way, run the other way. So he said, how do you be creative? I'll tell you how I do it. I declare what I want, and then I let it go. And I'm 6, and I was like, huh?
Right.
And he said, well, son, when you decide what you want, if it will serve others, it will come to you. And I said, really? He says, that's been my experience. I said, well, how do I know when it comes? And he said, that's a great question. He said, once you declare what you want, then you must be vigilant. Because when it comes to you, you may not recognize it. Otherwise, it would not be new. That was so cool. And then I said, well, how do I know if it's good or bad? He said, oh, that's simple, son. You know when things are good or bad. If you're around people that don't make you feel good, right? You get away from them. If you like people, you're drawn to them. He said the same thing with ideas. And he said, then you must be a good host. So you invite that idea in to you. And just like when your friend Georgie comes over, you throw him an apple. Throw that idea an apple. Be a good host. And if that idea is supposed to stay with you, it will become part of you. And if it's not supposed to stay with you, it'll leave happily and tell other ideas it's found a good host. So that was the basis of my creative life. And from that moment on, I just did that. And I listened. And then another time, Dad said, creating is listening.
So is your dad some sort of mystic sage?
What
did he do for a living? I'm curious.
Well, my dad was self-taught on the trumpet, and yet later went to Juilliard and studied with the greatest trumpet teacher ever. And then he played in the studios. He was the most amazing dad. My brother John and I both said, luckily we sang his praises while he was alive because he was just amazing. We used to say, Dad, what is it with you? You just have the right thing to say. And he says, I just try to do what I feel is right. And interestingly, he grew up without a father. His father died when he was 4 of typhoid. And his mother raised him as a single mom. And in the early part of last century, that was not easy. But she was the one that imbued him with you can do anything you want.
Right.
Anything is possible. So the other thing Dad taught me was do what you love. So while the other dads on the block, because I was a war baby, right? 30 kids on our blocks, and the dads...
So that's not a regular notion at that time.
It wasn't at all.
It's like put food on the table, whatever it is you need to do.
Exactly. You need to be organized, you need to do this. Well, Dad expected that of us. He never said a word about it, but we knew. And what he expected was our best. Whatever you do your best job the first time. Whatever is worth doing right the first time, were his exact words. And then he said, do what you love. Son, if you do what you love, everything else will fall into place. And I trusted him, and I've lived my life that way. I've never really had a job, what you call a real job. Right. I swept out a cleaner for a few weeks. You know what I mean? And I had paper routes and stuff like that. But basically, the other thing is serve others. We're all here to serve others, and no matter what we do. Our next door neighbor owned a bakery. The other one was a major in the U.S. Army. The guy across the street owned a car repair place. And Dad pointed out, he says, you see everybody here, everybody around us is serving other people. If you need your car fixed, you go to Howard. If you want a donut, you go to Bill.
Yeah.
If you want to start a war, you go to Mr. Mason.
Different kind of service.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting too, because I wonder if that sense of leading with service has gotten lost with a lot of people these days.
I would agree with that, Jonathan, because we're so focused on making money. And that has become a primary focus of the Western societies. And before the industrial, we needed the industrial age because we wouldn't be sitting here with this. So personally, I'm very grateful for it. But the thing is, in my opinion, we're still stuck in it. Because we're still thinking, we're testing people on certain parts of their being, you know, and yes, they're all valid, but they don't touch the whole person. And before the industrial age, all learning was done through storytelling. And this is one of my loves for Aesop, because he's still quoted 1 million times a day, and he lived 2,600 years ago.
Right.
Who lived at that time? Certainly Christ and Muhammad, and you know, I mean, there are people that are quoted like that, but he was really before all of them. And it wasn't a religious thing, you know, I mean, somehow he was able to ingest the philosophy that was being born at that time and present it in such a simple way that we're still saying it today. And we think about Aesop's fables as being for children. Yeah. And that shows their real power to me, because they were really primers of nations. But they were so whole that we can tell them to a little kid.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. So, and I actually want to talk a lot more about that, because that's a lot of what your work has been around. But I still want to fill in the path a little bit before we get there. So you have these amazing conversations with your dad at 6, which is still blowing my mind. You know, like I don't think many people have conversations anywhere near that level with parents or even people around them that, you know, at any age. So you have this incredible experience of being guided by somebody who's offering unusual advice. And that, I guess, opens you to the notion that, and I guess because he was a musician too. Yes, and you know, the other thing that just popped up for me, I remember those, I'm visualizing these times. Dad was always put himself at our eye level. Oh, that's interesting. He didn't talk down to us like this. When he started having a conversation with him, he squatted, or he got on, you know, he just kind of... He met you where you were. And met us right on our level. Yeah, I never thought of that until now. What an amazing guy. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. And yeah, he loved music, and he loved it so much that he played in the studios with Fox, Paramount, MGM, RKO as a studio trumpet player. But after the war, he decided that he loved playing trumpet so much that he no longer wanted to do it as a business. So, but he loved music, so he and my grandfather bought a small jukebox route and built it into 54 spots. From Long Beach to Santa Monica, we had every jukebox about going there. And the Seabird 100s were just coming out, so we were warehousing 5,000 records at a time. Huh, nice. Now, to give you an idea how Dad thinks, he's looking at this warehouse and he's thinking, wait a minute, these records are just sitting here waiting to go into a jukebox. Why don't we open a storefront and serve the neighborhood? So we did, and we lived in Inglewood, and there was Fifth Avenue in Inglewood, a little different than Fifth Avenue in New York. So we had Fifth Avenue music. And that was a thrill for me, because we would give Dad a list. Now, he didn't work in the store, but he stopped by every day, you know? We'd give Dad a list of songs we wanted, and he'd bring them home. So our pastiche of music was, I mean, it was enormous. And then he would bring us what we wanted, but he would also bring us stuff that he wanted us to hear. And it was so, he fed us what we asked for, and then he said, oh, by the way, I brought jazz at the Philharmonic. Let's listen to it together. And we listened to it, and we go, whoa, Dad, what's that, and what's that? And he'd say, well, you know, and that's how I learned, actually, I think that's how I learned about creativity, because I sat next to him one night. We used to have musicians over to the house every Tuesday night, and they would play and jam.
And Dad still had some little music stands that sat down like this. And so I remember being so proud of myself that I could read along with while he was playing. And they were playing Lady Be Good. It's like, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just like, yeah. And I'm sitting next to Dad. Dad's playing. I'm over here. And pretty soon, he starts playing a solo. But I didn't know what a solo was. And he's not playing the notes on the paper. And I'm like,
where's he going?
and he can see that I'm doing it. And he looks down at me and he winks. Later on, I said, Dad, what were you doing? And he says, oh, I was improvising. I said, oh. Okay, what is that? And he said, well, that's when you let the music take you. And I'll never forget that either.
Yeah.
And to me, that's always been what I love about improvising, is that you get into the song and then you're so filled with it that you just lose yourself. And what comes out of your instrument is what you're being guided or gifted to play.
Yeah.
And it's really this is what Mozart did. I mean, this is the classical form, quite frankly. Classical form of music is exposition, development, recapitulation. So exposition is da 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 dee da 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 da, right? So you learn the song. Then you go into the development. That is him improvising upon that melody, but he's doing it on paper. Well, he's actually hearing it, and then he's writing it down. And then when they get through with that, he develops it and makes it wonderful. And then he goes back, and recapitulation is a repetition of the first melody. Well, when you hear somebody play jazz, they'll play Lady Be Good, then they play their solos, and they come back and play Lady Be Good again, and that's it. So it's the same form as classical music. Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah, that's really, I never even thought about it that way, but it makes perfect sense that it should be
It
like
does.
that. Yeah.
And because there's something about we humans that love form.
Right.
I mean, otherwise we
Yeah.
probably
And
wouldn't
even
be sitting in a building.
Right, and it's so funny because I've had this conversation about creativity on so many, whether you're a painter or a writer, and so many creatives, when I say, okay, if you're writing a story, there's actually there's a fairly linear story arc that humans just are drawn to. We want to see the pieces of that arc. And then people would be like, well, that completely limits me. It boxes me in. I can't do that. I need to be completely unframed, unstructured, and write what I need to write. And the people that I know that have created really extraordinary things, I think have gone out there and then come back and said, the structure, having the structure actually increases freedom. Because it forces you to lean into it on a different level.
Yes.
And what comes out of that is pretty extraordinary.
I couldn't agree with you more. And Quincy Jones, as you know, is one of my dearest friends. And we've been working together since 1973. And Quincy studied with Madame Boulanger, who was the greatest teacher of composers of the 20th century. She taught Stravinsky, she taught Shostakovich, she taught Quincy Jones. And actually in her memoirs, Quincy was her favorite student. Mm-hmm. So, and when you went to study with her, you'd walk in and greet her and she'd say, why are you here? What do you want? And Quincy said, I want to be free. I just want to be free to express myself, as you were saying. And she said, great. In order to be free, you must first totally restrict yourself. Mm. Then you know what freedom is. Mm. And those forms are there for a reason. Right. And some of us fall into them naturally. For me, I've always somehow understood it. I don't know why. But when I took form classes in school, because I studied music at the University in Southern California, and more than one of my professors said, because they graded on the curve, we'll give you an A, stay out of class. Because I was so educated by my father that I didn't know I was educated because we just sat down and talked. Yeah. And he'd pull out a score. And he says, son, I know you love Nessun Dorma. Look what it looks like. Isn't it a different experience to listen to it and to see it? And that's a way of learning, but he never said, study the score and know what it is. It's like, okay, fine. But the way he presented it was like, yeah, let's do this. Hey, Dad, bring out another score.
Right. Which for most kids, when your average teacher or your average parent is going to say, learn this.
Yeah.
This is this, just suck it up
Yes.
This is the stuff, it's not fun. They frame it as it's not fun, right? It's the boring stuff, it's the linear stuff, but you gotta learn it to get to the next place, rather than, how can I frame it differently so that there's life within even like that structure?
And it's a human experience to me that makes the difference. We all learn when we're having fun.
No doubt.
We used to go on vacation up to the Redwoods. And my brother is 2.5 years older. And we both started playing trumpet because we saw the love in my father's eyes when he played. And we wanted some of that. So I remember saying, Dad, I want to play trumpet. And he said, well, that's fine. That's good. He said, we can do that. But just understand, with every opportunity comes an equal responsibility. And I said, and? He says, well, if you're going to play trumpet, I expect you to practice at least 10 minutes a day. Well, I was 4. So, like, yeah, I can do that. And the thing was, after and it was only 10 minutes, but you know, within a couple of weeks, I had learned a ton. And he just let me go. He didn't say, do it this way, do it this way. He never said that. But I'd say, hey, Dad, how do I do this? And usually he'd say, how do you think you do it? I'd say, oh, man, if I knew, I wouldn't ask you.
Right.
And then he'd say, well, if you did know, right? And I'd say, oh, man, maybe I do this. And he goes, good start.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, Dad, that didn't work. And he says, yeah, but I bet you have another idea.
Nah.
Damn it. Yes, I did.
That's so powerful. So we're both parents. And I work hard to try and create that environment with my daughter. It's not easy because you have such an urge to jump in and do this.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I played a couple of years ago speaking with a guy named Bob Taylor who created Taylor guitars, one of the biggest handmade guitars in Fetcher. And at one point I was saying, I was thinking about going and doing this guitar building course. And he's like, no. And I said, but I can't work it into my schedule. He's like, no. He's like, here's what you do. Go online right now. He's like, leave this place. Go buy yourself a guitar kit. All the wood's cut, everything. It costs you $500. Bring it home and make one horrible guitar.
Yeah.
You will learn more making one bad guitar than you will ever learn taking courses on how to do it right, because you'll understand why things are done the way they are, and you'll understand then how to do them better. Because if you get taught by somebody how to do it right, there may be a much righter, there may be a whole different level of experience, but you'll never know because you'll kind of just be capped. I know how to do it already. Yes. So it's like when you struggle and when you stumble and when you're forced to work through it yourself, it's such a gift, regardless of whether it's music or art or work, whatever it is. But it's a gift that I don't think we allow ourselves the luxury of experiencing all that often these days, because we just want to get it done and be good.
Exactly. And this is another thing that Dad said to me, because you said, if you take this kit and build it, you'll build a bad guitar, but you'll know why. You'll learn why. And Dad always said, son, the man who knows how will always have a job working for the man who knows why. Mm-hmm. That was another tenet. And the thing is that my cousins and everybody, they quote him all the time. That's one cousin, Bruce, called me one day because he had read one of the, I'm writing articles about my father, by the way, in Huffington Post. And if you search Thomas Bahler, the series is called Lights Go On.
Yeah, we'll link to that also.
Yes. But anyway, he read one of the posts and he called me and he says, oh man, your dad, you just lit me up about your dad, thinking about things. And he says, I'll never forget when he said, the man who knows how will always have a job working for the man who knows why. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Little gems like that.
That's beautiful. So from this incredible foundation, at some point you decide, this is going to be my contribution.
Yeah, and I don't know that I ever decided, but it just kind of took its own form. And again, I was so encouraged to let things happen, to react instead of act. But then once you hear it, then you act. But a lot of times we act and then figure it out. Oh, I should have. Right.
Yeah.
And the way it happened for me was that I was a pretty good trumpet player, and so I put a band together just like we do, because it was fun.
Right.
And then pretty soon I was playing the school dances. And then pretty soon one band wasn't enough, because whatever I was doing was appealing to people. So they'd say, oh, I wish we could do this. And I thought, well, I'll just put another band together. So pretty soon I was 12 years old and I had 4 bands. I didn't mean to be the band maven. I was there to serve others.
At 12.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But it was fun because they were all my friends.
Right.
And they were thrilled because somehow I had the organizational qualities gifted me, you know, so just to give people what they want. So I'd say, yeah, well, let's see, what kind of dance is it? Okay, I'll send these guys over. 'Cause, you know, and kind of custom framing things. And then it just went on from there. And then my brother, who inherited a 16-piece dance band, kept it for a couple of years, and then he went into the Navy as a love of his, and left me the 16-piece band when I was 16. And I was the youngest guy in it. My lead alto player was 24 years old. And I had this big band, and I thought, well, it's here, let's do something with it. And I thought that it was kind of archaic in a certain way, so I thought, well, I want to upgrade the music. How do I do that? And I asked a few guys, do we know any arrangers? And they said, no, not really. And I thought, well, I'll just do it. So I started arranging. And it was amazing to me, Jonathan, because, again, doing what you hear, this is what Mozart did, you know? I find that most composers write this way. They used to say that Mozart looked like he was taking dictation when he wrote a symphony. Well, he was. He heard every part. He was just putting it on paper to share it with others. Well, my first arrangement, I had a specific idea. I heard it. And so I wrote it down on paper. And I was afraid because I thought, oh my gosh, what if these guys play it and it sucks? And I'm the leader, and you know, and I went through all of this stuff, and I thought, I'll just do it. And I kicked it off, and it sounded exactly like it sounded in my head. It was such a thrill. I can't tell you. Because that was validation of trusting what I heard. And that's really been my focus on life, is to, when I get a project, because sometimes you're inspired, you know? If I'm inspired by a woman, or by an incident, or by a relative, or whoever it is that really inspires me, I'll write it in some form, either in words or music, or words and music. Well, when I went into the industry and was doing things in the advertising field, you know, it's not that easy to get all excited about Arrow's new flashy color charts. So I just found something to make me inspired. So they were doing this thing, and they started out with this chorus singing sort of Gregorian chant in, you know, muted colors. And then it breaks into, then somebody kind of breaks out of that, and it ends up being this big party. And actually, I won a, whatever the thing is for the, I forget anyway, it's like the Academy Award for commercials, but
like a Clio or something.
Yeah,
like
that was it. Thank you.
Right.
Yes, I won a couple of those, and it was fun. But what interested me was the transformation. That's what ignited me. We're starting with this muted. We're going to this party. How do we make that transition seamless? Seamless has always been a big word for me. I like to do things seamlessly. One thing leads into another. And that's really what inspired me, and ended up just being wonderful.
So you found your motivation in the process rather than the product.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, I get in, whatever it takes to get inspired. What I do is I drill down into that idea, and I think about the other thing I learned from Dad. I remember one, this is after I'm grown and I'm in the business, one of my clients asked for something that I thought I just didn't agree with at all. But I didn't say anything. I just listened to him, and I said, okay. So I called Dad and I said, Dad, this is a stupid idea. I'm really, but I didn't feel like saying anything. He said, well, it's probably good you didn't. He said, give them what they want. I said, okay, but it's dumb. And he says, then give them what you want. Then, if you have time, give them something that is a mixture of the two. So I walked into the client, I gave them what they wanted, and they said, that's what we wanted. I said, well, you know what, this is so much fun, I kind of did another thing. Oh, let's hear it. Whoa, we love that. And I say, yeah, then I kind of mixed the two. Well, most of the time, it was taking their idea and my idea and put them together, and we made a baby. And more times out than not, that would be the product that we would end up with. Another great formula.
And what a great approach just to business and life.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, rather than saying, no, you're wrong, I'm not going to do it, say, like, in some way, I can serve you, but I believe that I can serve you better than you're asking me to serve you. But instead of forcing it down your throat, let me give you what you want, but I'm going to offer you the possibility of being served on a higher level.
Yes.
Take it if you want it. It's
You
rather
know,
than
never
saying
had
you're
them
wrong.
not take that. Never
Interesting.
did they say, no, but this is what we wanted, we're fine.
Right.
No, they always went beyond it.
Yeah, interesting. So at some point in your journey, you meet who you mentioned, Quincy Jones, who's now one of your close friends.
Yes.
Tell me how that unfolds, and what does that do within the context of your journey?
Well, you know, I'm talking a lot about my dad, but my mom was awesome too. And my mom was a fundamental holy roller. And she raised me in a black gospel church. And she was the first white soprano in a 100-voice choir. It's called the Sky Pilot Revival Center on Western Avenue. And Doris Akers was the leader of that choir, and she's now in the Smithsonian Institute. She's one of the early purveyors of gospel music. She was the disciple of Thomas Dorsey, who was the man who disseminated gospel music, gave it form, and as we were talking about form, right?
Yeah.
So we can share it with others. So I grew up with that, and so I had I was influenced by that black music. And my father was so excited about it because he too used to go down into black neighborhoods and play with black bands. Because he said, there is a difference. It's wonderful. One's not better than the other for me, but this is a flavor I want.
Yeah.
You know? So Motown moved to LA. My brother and I kind of rocketed into business within the business. Nobody knew who we were, which I loved. But we came in the rock and roll era just as it was hitting the mainstream. But the rock and rollers, for the most part, weren't trained, right? So they would give you a great product, but you didn't know when you were going to get it, and if it didn't work, too bad. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my brother and I were able to do both of those things, or all of them. So our client list grew rather quickly, and Motown moved to LA in '72 from Detroit, and they actually advertised for black arrangers. And my brother and I showed up, and they were very
Like,
sweet.
what?
But they said, "Are you in the right suite?" And we said, "Well, yeah, you're looking for black arrangers, aren't you?" And they said, "Exactly, we're looking for black arrangers." And we said, "Here, listen to this." And they went, "Damn." And so John and I started working at Motown 2 or 3 days a week. And we worked with every group they had. One of my favorite was the Jackson 5. And Michael was 11 years old. And he blew me away then. I remember coming home and just thinking, I'm looking at Fred Astaire. Our generation's, Fred Astaire.
No kidding.
Just is so amazing. So disciplined and so good and so heartfelt. This is at 11. It was astounding. So I worked in this area a lot, and they were, Gladys Knight and the Pips was a big hit. And Gladys Knight was kind of a jazz singer before she got into being Gladys Knight and the Pips. So they thought, well, we can do this with Sarah Vaughan, because they wanted to sell records, and she's a great singer. They thought, well, we can do this with Sarah Vaughan. So they came to me, and I put the vocal group together, and they brought in the songs, and I did the charts, and it turned out great. In fact, Sarah, this is what I love about really great people. They're humble. Sarah Vaughan comes to me and says, "I love this, but tell me how to sing it." I said, "Sarah, please. Just go be Sarah, you'll be fine." But I mean, what a vulnerable, sweet thing to do. She was a little bit out of her box, and she needed somebody to tell her, "You're fine." But the people that won't do that somehow seem to fall off the map. It's been my experience. So anyway, I did these things for Sarah, and Quincy just happened to be walking by the booth as they were mixing down the song. And he's poked his head in and said, "Ooh, who did that chart?" He said, "Tommy Bahler." He said, "Well, how do I get a hold of him?" And we all had answering services at that time. So my answering service calls me and they said, "Quincy Jones wants to talk to you." I went, "Well, put him on."
Right.
And he said, "Hey, I heard some of your charts, man, and I'm doing a new album, kind of a new direction, and I'd like to work with you." I said, "Name the place, name the time." And that's when I went over to his house, and he had a glass front door, and Quincy has the coolest walk, man. He's got this lumber. And he's walking to the front door as I ring the doorbell, and he looks up, and it's like this, you know, and he says, "You're Tommy Bahler?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "You're not white." I said, "Well, I am what I am." And he invited me in, and you know, this is what I knew about Quincy immediately. Where did we go? When somebody invites you to their home at the first time, if you go into the living room, that's a normal place to go. It's very formal. He took me right into his kitchen. That's the hearth. That's the heart of the house. We walked right into his kitchen, and we're talking for a minute about what he wants to do. And he says, "You know, your mama gave you an overdose of Nadenola when you were little." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "It's a bleaching cream that black people use to pass, and you're passing one." So that was the greatest compliment he could give me. And from that moment, he and I have always had the world as our playground. One of the reasons we're still together and creatively go on journeys together is somehow our energies kick the other one up a step.
Yeah. And when you find people like that, you hold on.
Well, I remember when I did his first gold record with him, you know, so when it went gold, that helped to cement our relationship as well. But I remember walking into his house one day and say, "Q, I've worked on the mountaintop. I don't want to work in the valley anymore." And he said, "I feel the same way about you." Oh, really? And he certainly stepped up my game more than any other human being, and without trying. And he's also been a great source. He is so funny, and yet his wisdom is amazing. I remember one day I was working on something. So I met him, I was 30, he was 40. I'm doing something, and he says, "Nan, are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I'm at a critical point." And he said, "I think you're critical about the point you're at." I went, "Oh, I'm fine."
Like,
is that cool?
You've been channeling my dad?
Exactly. And I remember when we were doing She's Out of My Life, I had this little right hand, da-da-da-da-dee-da-da-dum. This has become kind of a signature of the intro, which is really a takeoff on Bach. And then I had a descending line in the left hand. So when we go in to record it, I'm hearing the pianos going da-da-da-da-dee-da-da-da, but nothing in the left hand. And I say, "Hey, Q, where's the left hand thing?" He says, "Man, I love that lick in the right hand. I just love that lick in the right hand." I said, "Yeah, but where's the one in the left hand?" He said, "I love that lick in the right hand." I mean, he's trying to hint to me. And I wouldn't take it. I said, "Quincy, where is the left hand?" He says, "You know, Nan, there was a time when I would have thought that was good too." Shut the fuck up. You know, but did it so kindly.
Right.
He was speaking at a college one day and takes questions, and this young woman stands up and she said, "But Mr. Jones, how do you keep from being discouraged? This business is so hard." And he said, "My dear, if you can be discouraged, you should be discouraged." Wow. That wasn't funny, but it was
powerful.
But you know, powerful. So once I met Quincy, my life did change, because I also did a lot of work at Disney, because one of my early mentors was Robert F. Yanni, and he was the head of special events at USC, my university, and he and I hooked up early. And I credit him with taking me just out of music and putting me into the theater. We used to do spring sings and all these things, and they were competitive, and I had written a number for my fraternity and sorority, and the greatest fun is that we'd have 30 guys and 30 girls, and you'd hook up with the sorority, and a lot of marriages and all sorts of things came out of that. And so we do the prelims, and he would judge the prelims, and I wrote a number that was 2 minutes long, and you had up to 6 minutes. So he said, who did this? And I raised my hand. He says, come here, I'd like to talk to you. He said, I love what you've written, but it's only 2 minutes. I said, well, I figured that 2 minutes of something good is better than 6 minutes of something that isn't. He says, yes, but 6 minutes of something good is what I'm looking for. And I said, well, I kind of shot it, man. I don't really know where to go from here. And he said, well, let me help you. Because I had written a song about, there's a concert in the park. It was set in the early part of the 19th century when people went to the park to hear the bands. And, you know, they're all dressed up in their finery and riding their bikes and things. And the song depicted that beautifully. He says, well, you're talking about going to the park and hearing a concert, have the concert. I said, all I got is voices. He says, so what? Your basses are tubas, your baritones are baritones and trombones, your sopranos are clarinets. So that's all I needed to hear. And I wrote a number that included that. And then again, that was kind of like the development section. And then it went back to the song and we won. And so I started hanging out with him. And he said, you know, he said, you're a creative guy. And I said, thank you. And he said, but I think your creativity goes beyond music. And I said, well, I know my hunger does. I want to know more about everything. I just believe in everything. And he says, well, let me show you. So he kind of schooled me or introduced me to, you know, how music can play roles in different ways, theatrically and things. And then later on, he brought me to Radio City as creative director. And when he asked me to do that, I said, what's a creative director? And he said, I'll show you. And I learned that being a creative director is having faith in your own taste and share it with others.
So which brings up a really interesting question, though. And this is a famous Ira Glass quote. And you know, people were asking him, how are you so good at like your radio show? And his answer, I don't remember his exact words, but it was something like, you know, the difference between people who rise to the top who are really good and the ones where you have taste. And the challenge is you can have taste early on, but not have the ability to actually get what's in your head out into the world. And it takes practice and craft to be able to express the taste. The taste is like the decide, and I'm not doing justice to the quote, but so I guess part of the question is, in your mind, this is curiosity, you know, that taste, is it born into you, or is it something you acquire over time, or is it?
What comes to me first is born with it. But I know I've acquired a lot more. But I'm not so sure that we're not all born with taste. My theory is that, which is just coming to me at this very moment.
We'll allow for some wiggle room down the road.
I think human beings are born with all the qualities that we need. And somehow, through the way we're raised, through nobody's fault, but a lot of times trying to protect you, you'll get things squashed so you stop believing. And when I speak, a lot of times I speak, if I'm speaking to a group of 300 people, I will ask how many people can sing. I don't mean have a career, just sing for your own enjoyment. About 60 people, 60% will raise their hands. And I said, who can't sing? And about 40% raise their hands. And I say to them, you believe the lie. All human beings can, if you can speak, you can sing. That is something that's imbued in every human being. But somewhere along the line, somebody said, you're not a singer, and you believe them. And I teach people to sing on the spot. I'm not teaching them to sing, I'm teaching them to believe in themselves. And to me, that is what creativity, but see, I was so nurtured creatively that I was courageous because I had no reason not to be.
Right, exactly. You were given the container to experiment and explore, and to be wrong and to be right, and wrong was right.
Yes, and Bob saw that in me. In fact, he said, okay, go down, look at this set, and and there's something wrong with it, and I want you to fix it. I said, okay. And I walked out, and I was very nervous. And I thought, well, stop being nervous. You're not going to see anything if you're nervous. So I just calmed myself down. So I just thought, well, I'm just going to look. And I looked. Pretty soon it was like, oh, well, this needs, and this needs, and this should. And I went back up, and he said, so what are your thoughts? And I said, well, he says, bravo. And then he says, okay, design the band car. I said, what? He said, design the band car. We have 45 people in the orchestra. Put them on there. I went, I've never done that. But then I thought, so what?
Yeah.
So I designed it, gave it to him. He says, perfect. And then, but he gave me some ideas. Like we had 2 Steinway 9-foot pianos, and we were being sponsored by them. And he says, they need to be prominent.
Right, yeah.
Well, of course. But that actually set up the whole design.
Right.
You know?
Structure again.
Exactly, structure.
You got that nugget, right? Yeah.
And in fact, that's what Quincy did on We Are the World. He wanted me to do the vocal arrangement, which to me was vocal arranging in heaven. Look at the people that we had.
Right. Who was that? I mean, it was.
Oh my gosh.
Who wasn't on that, actually?
Well, yeah, Lionel Richie wrote it, and then Lionel Richie wrote it, and then Michael joined him, and they both wrote it. And then you had Kenny Rogers. I mean, pretty much, there are 45
right, like
major
Bono, like
stars.
all that, just the range of people on that was staggering.
And so it was a thrill to have those voices. And the only caveat, Quincy says, okay, here, you do the arrangement any way you want it. But here's the deal. Lionel wrote it, so he should be the first one to sing. Michael wrote it, so he should do the first chorus. And because Diana was such a prominent part in his early career, she should join him on the first chorus. From there, it's yours. And again, listening and hearing, knowing these voices, Steve Perry, I'm talking about outstanding voices, you know, and Bruce Springsteen. I mean, by the time I got to the second chorus, that's what I heard. We are the world, you know.
Yeah.
And then there's a choice we're making. You know, the way Steve did that. Anyway, I just heard it all.
Right.
And
what's it like though? Because you're hearing it in your head. What's it like when you're standing in that room the first time you hear it all?
It's always a thrill. And as I mentioned, my first arrangement was the validation of that. So now I expect it.
Yeah.
It's not so much of a thrill. It's like having babies. The first one, I imagine being a father for the first time was an extraordinary thrill for me. It was. I'll never forget it. In fact, I had to excuse myself and go in to the restroom and bawl like a baby. Just with my, you know, so much joy in me. I couldn't. Yeah. And yet my second baby, you know, was like, yes, so wonderful. But it wasn't that first time. So for me now, I still get thrilled at everything I do. And I expect it to be something. So when I hear it, it's like, yes. I mean, I still get excited, but it's not like, you know, the first time it's like, whoa.
Which I guess is part of the, you know, and you know, your evolution now is, so you've moved into other things, you know. So you have a brand new book out now, which, by the way, we have right here. Beautiful copy. Anything is possible. So now you're an author. So you've moved to, you know, your creative expression is across so many different areas, and so it seems like maybe part of what happens, I know this with me, is that you're looking to expand the way that you create, but also maybe, like, are you looking also for that? I want to feel that again, and maybe in a different medium or in a whole different challenge or a different area, I can get to that place.
Don't be so smart. I think you're absolutely right. I never thought of that, but I think you're right. I think you're absolutely on the money.